Greetings and welcome back to CS275 Database Development. In this lesson we're going to go over calculated fields and manipulating data. So our main topics, what is concatenation, using arithmetic, and then looking over some functions and what they do and why you would use them. Of course, objectives is for you to actually then demonstrate using these techniques on a pre-existing database. So let's first start off with calculated fields. In this one, we're going to go over this concept of concatenation. If you program, you're probably somewhat familiar with this. You're taking strings, which is text, and you're adding them together, right? You're putting them together. So a couple things for those of you not familiar with programming. You need the spaces in there when you concatenate, right? So this is one string, and if you don't have a space, it's going to all come together. Now, I'm going to, in this case, for a lot of these, go ahead and show the code right away as we go through this. So I'm going to pull this over, and here is that same code, select concatenate, right? So this is a function. We'll go a little bit more into that later, but the concatenate's a function. So we're putting this piece that we want to concatenate into it. So this is a string, SQL space, comma, and right now. So this is an example, so it's not super, I mean, you wouldn't really use this is what I'm saying, but this is how it's working, right? So when I click enter, as concatenated string becomes the header. And that's another thing we'll go over in a little bit, this as. But for now, the concept you can see is SQL tutorial is fun, right? You can see how that's working. Now, let's look at an example of actually concatenating something that would be more useful. So in this case, I'm concatenating from our user table, all right? So this is where it comes relevant to what we're doing. I want to put first name, comma, so notice there's no quotes around first name, all right? That is the actual column title. So you don't put quotes around it, or literally we'll just say first name space last name. So what this is going to do is grab our first name, add a space, the comma is just kind of separating, letting the computer know I want my first name, I want a space, I want the last name, and I want a space. I don't know why I left that space in there. It doesn't really do anything, but you'll see it, right? And then again, that as keyword, full name. So when I click enter on this, it took the first name and the last name, and it concatenated them together in full name, right? So this as is really important, right? You're taking these two columns and you're essentially combining them into one. So this is a good example of using it. This top one is just how it works, but this is a good example of getting the data out that you need, right? So if you exported this to Excel, you wouldn't need to have you don't have to concatenate them later in Excel or whatever. You can just have it already pulled out for you. So this right here is that example I did with the first and last name. All right. Now, depending on the data that gets put in, you might have spaces on the side, right? So I'll show how this works with that exact example. And you'll see there's a bunch of space on this side, a bunch of space on this side. It's telling it what its column name is going to be, and you can see that there is no space on it, right? This space right here is, as you can see, it's there too, right? It's not actually part of it, so this space is gone, right? It got rid of those extra spaces. An example of when that would be useful is when you let users put information into your database. You get a web app or whatever, and they put information in, and you don't actually want those spaces, and they actually accidentally added spaces. That might be an example of when you'd want to do it. Because normally, if you're the one putting in the data, then just don't put the spaces in there. But trim is, again, a function, right? You put trim in here, and you put it in. I could, this won't do anything. Again, get rid of the quotes, and I could put in first name, as, oops, it did not go over there. I could do first name as fname. And the only difference would, if you're pulling it from it, you just need that, from in here, right? So this is just an example of the function. And then if you did users, you would go ahead. Again, that didn't do anything, right? Their first name didn't have spaces, so there's nothing to trim. But it did give you that fname, and then so we know the column's name is normally first name, and all this really did was give us a different column header name for that. So that's some good examples of using that. Mostly, again, if you're programming, that would be it when you would use it. And finally, I'm just going to show you what we've been doing this whole time. You don't necessarily need to use the trim function or the concatenate function. You can just rename your columns, right? So let's say that you used select and your column name is fname, right? Because you're lazy, you don't want to type. I respect that, right? So select fname, and then you could do as first name from. So when you actually pull it out, now again, from my standpoint, I'm going to do that in reverse order, right? So I'm going to select first name as fname, and in this case I'm actually shrinking it because I already called it first name. But you can go through and just do it, and as you notice, the results were the same because trimming the first name didn't need any trimming, but I did as and change it as something else. So you could do lots of different things. I could capitalize this if I wanted to, put an underscore in it, and all it's doing is this. So again, fairly simple concepts, but it's important to understand that you know that you can do this and you know how to use it. And then really the hardest part of all this is knowing when to use it, right? So again, it is important to understand what we're going over here on these last few slides, like what is it doing, and be able to do it. A lot of the times you're not going to do it, but there will be times that you can. All right. The last piece of this before we go into more details on the functions is you can actually do arithmetic. So in this case, we're going to select ID, name, salary, and then notice that these are all, this is just going to return the ID, this is going to return the name, this is going to return the salary, and then this piece, again, it's all separated by commas, so salary times 1.1 as bonus. So if we would run this would be the headers would be their normal thing. But again, let's go ahead and look at this from a actual standpoint. So I'm going to copy some code over here and we'll explain it. So select first name and the age. So if you remember, we have first name, last name, nickname, age, right? Those are the columns in the users. But in this case, we're going to select the first name and the age divided by 7 as dog age. So let's look at the results of this, because this hopefully helps you understand what I mean by first name just gave me first name. And then I did dog age is their age divided by 7, right? So that as is why this says dog age, and age divided by 7 gives us this result. So if we were to just go through here and delete the as part of it, we could see first name age, and there's their actual age, and it says the name of the column. Now you can also go through and add a comma and then add their nickname. The key is that comma, right? The comma separates it. So so far, I guess the point I'm getting at is, so far you've looked at the as was always the last thing. This last example I'm showing you is, it doesn't matter, right? First name just gives you the first name. Comma, this whole thing, I'm getting age, but I'm displaying it as dog age. And then comma, I get my nickname. So again, you can show a column, you can show an alias column, You can show a regular column, alias, you can do whatever you need to get that to work. All right, so those are some of the manipulation and stuff that you can do with it. The last piece we're going to look at are these functions. Now, I'm not going to go over every single function. We saw a few of those. So a lot of these convert stuff to strings, to numbers, get you the date. So what I'm going to do is click on this link and show you there are a lot of functions. A lot. You can truncate. You can get the square root of the number. So if we wanted to get the square root of their age, we would use the square root function, right? So there are a ton of different things you could do. Trim, replace, reverse, all kinds of different things. And if you really want to see how it looked, again, that is a function. So the name of the function, and then whatever you want to do. And again, this is an example, so it's just a string, but you could put the first name column into that, and it would get you the length of that string, or the first name, right? So whatever happens to be in that. Now, this example here, as we started off with the last one, will literally just give you the length of this. But if you ran it and you got the from users, you could get the character length of each of those names, right? So if in this case, if I did this, the length of John, all of these would just say 4, right? So that is pretty much it for this. We kind of did the demos as we were going for this one, just so you could really see what it looked like as we were going along. But there are tons and tons of things that are built in that you can use, and the key point of that is understanding how the functions work, right? Whatever function name, you just type it, and then whatever you want it to be done to it, right? So in this case, we are trimming the first name. In this case, we are concatenating first name space last name. When we look at the other examples, we can see, all right, I'm setting the ceiling, and I'm actually using a number to get the ceiling, which is just rounding. So anyway, that is our lesson for the day. We'll see you next lesson.